The crystalline chambers of the Zelithian High Council hummed with an energy that made Naya's skin tingle. She knelt before the obsidian throne where Regent Valak sat, his silver eyes gleaming like twin moons in the ethereal light. The geometric patterns etched into his pale blue skin seemed to shift and dance as he studied her with predatory interest. Agent Naya of the 7th Cadre. His voice resonated through the chamber. Like distant thunder, you have been chosen for a mission of utmost importance to our empire. Naya kept her gaze fixed on the polished floor, her heart racing with anticipation. After 3 years of rigorous training in espionage and infiltration, she had finally been selected for a real assignment. The bioneural implants at the base of her skull pulsed with readiness, prepared to download whatever intelligence package the Regent deemed necessary. The humans, Valak continued, rising from his throne with fluid grace, have established a colony on the world they call Heavens. Rest. Intelligence suggests they are developing new defensive technologies that could threaten our expanse. Ion into the outer sectors. You will infiltrate their society, gather intelligence on their military capabilities, and identify vulnerabilities we can exploit. The holographic display materialized before her, showing a blue-green world dotted with small human settlements. It looked peaceful, almost primitive compared to the towering crystal cities of Zelith. How could such a backward species pose any threat to their advanced civilization? Your genetic modifications will allow you to pass for human, Valak explained as the display shifted to show anatomical comparisons. The neural suppressors will mask your telepathic abilities, and the biomimetic skin will hide your natural coloration. To them, you will appear as nothing more than another refugee seeking shelter. Naya finally looked up, meeting her superior's gaze. How long do I have to complete the mission? Regent, 6 months to gather intelligence, another 6 to prepare. Our forces for occupation. His smile was cold and calculating. The humans have something we need. Their emotional unpredictability makes them dangerous adversaries if we underestimate them, but it also makes them vulnerable to manipulation by someone who understands their weaknesses. The biomodification chamber felt like a tomb as Naya lay still. While machines rewrote her very essence, her naturally pale blue skin darkened to a warm human tan, her silver hair became rich brown, and her height decreased by several inches to match human proportions. The most unsettling change was the dampening of her telepathic senses. Suddenly, the constant background hum of minds around her fell silent, leaving her feeling isolated and vulnerable. When she emerged 12 hours later, even her own reflection seemed alien. The woman staring back from the mirror had human features so perfect they were almost unsettling. Only her eyes remained unchanged, a deep violet that she would need to explain away as a genetic quirk. 3 days later, Naya's transport ship approached Heaven's Rest under the cover of a merchant vessel. The planet looked even more beautiful from orbit than it had in the holographic displays, with vast oceans reflecting the light of its twin suns, and continents painted in every shade of green and gold. It was nothing like the stark, efficient beauty of Zelith, but there was something appealing about its wild, untamed appearance. The landing port in the settlement of Millbrook was a chaotic maze of prefabricated buildings and bustling activity. Humans of every description moved through the crowds, tall and short, dark and light, their emotions broadcasting from their faces in ways that would have been considered improper. Among her own people, the cacophony of voices, mechanical sounds, and alien scents overwhelmed her dampened senses. Next, a harried-looking official waved her forward to a processing station. Name and point of origin, Vera Chen, she replied, using the identity her handlers had crafted. I'm from the Kepler colony. Our settlement was destroyed in the mineral extraction accident 3 months ago. The man's expression softened with sympathy. Heaven's Rest had become a refuge for displaced colonists from across the sector. So her story wasn't unusual. I'm sorry for your loss. We'll get you processed and assigned temporary housing. Are you trained in any particular skills? Basic engineering and mechanical repair, she answered, drawing on knowledge implanted during her preparation. I can work with most standard equipment. An hour later, she found herself standing outside a modest residential complex with a keycard to a small apartment and directions to the local employment office. The efficiency of human bureaucracy was surprisingly impressive, though she noted several security weaknesses that would be useful. In her eventual report, her apartment was spartanly furnished but clean, with a window that looked out over the settlement's main street. As she unpacked her few belongings, Naya began to formulate her plan. She would need to establish herself as a trustworthy member of the community, gain access to their infrastructure, and identify key personnel who might have knowledge of defensive capabilities. The next morning, she made her way to the employment office, a cheerful building painted in bright yellow with flowering plants growing in window boxes. The contrast with the sterile functionality of Zelithian architecture was jarring, but she found herself oddly charmed by the unnecessary decorative touches. Vera Chen, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, smiled at her from behind a desk covered in datapads and actual papered documents. "I'm Beth Morrison, the employment coordinator. I see you have mechanical skills. We actually have several openings in that field." Beth led her through a list of available positions, from factory maintenance to private repair services. "There's also Marcus Rivera," she said, pulling up a file on her screen. "He runs an independent garage on the outskirts of town. Good man, honest work, and he's been looking for an assistant for months. Only thing is, he can be a bit particular about who he works with." Something in the woman's tone suggested there was more to the story. "Particular how? Oh, nothing bad," Beth assured her quickly. "He's just very dedicated to his work, and he's had some bad experiences with assistants who weren't as committed. He tends to keep to himself, but once you earn his trust, he's incredibly loyal. Would you like me to arrange an introduction?" An hour later, Naya found herself walking through the quieter residential areas toward the address Beth had provided. The garage was located in a converted warehouse, with large bay doors and the sounds of machinery coming from within. She could smell motor oil and heated metal, along with something that might have been coffee. She knocked on the smaller side door, her enhanced hearing picking up the sound of footsteps approaching. The door opened to reveal a man in his early 30s with dark hair, pulled back in a practical ponytail, and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His hands were stained with grease, and his work clothes had seen better days, but there was something solid and dependable about his presence. "You must be Vera," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't place. Beth called ahead. "I'm Marcus Rivera." "Nice to meet you," she replied, extending her hand. His grip was firm and calloused from years of manual work. "Come on in, let me show you round." He led her into the garage, which was surprisingly well organized despite the apparent chaos. Tools hung in precise arrangements, parts were sorted and labeled, and several vehicles in various states of repair occupied the work bays. "I specialize in atmospheric flyers and ground vehicles, some industrial equipment when needed." As he explained his operation, Naya found herself genuinely interested in the elegant simplicity of his setup. Zelithian technology was far more advanced, but there was something appealing about the hands-on approach humans took to problem-solving. She watched his face as he talked about his work, noting the passion and pride in his voice. "The position would be part-time to start," Marcus continued, "while you learn my systems. I need someone who can handle basic maintenance, keep track of inventory, and maybe help with the more complex repairs once you're up to speed. What's your experience with gravitational stabilizers?" The question caught her off guard. Gravitational stabilizers were cutting-edge technology, well beyond what she'd expected to find in a small-town garage. "I've worked with them before," she said carefully, "but I'm always interested in learning new approaches." Something in his expression shifted, becoming more focused. "Good. Most people think they're just plug-and-play devices, but they require real understanding to maintain properly. Come back tomorrow morning at 8, and we'll see how you do with a practical test." As she walked back toward town, Naya reflected on the encounter. Marcus Rivera was clearly more skilled than his humble garage suggested, and his casual mention of advanced technology raised questions about what else might be hidden in this seemingly simple colony. More importantly, there had been something in his eyes when he looked at her, not suspicion, exactly, but a kind of careful attention that suggested he was more observant than most. This assignment was already proving more complex than she had anticipated. The humans weren't just primitive colonists struggling to survive. They were a people with hidden depths and unexpected capabilities, and Marcus Rivera, with his quiet competence and penetrating gaze, was going to be either a valuable source of intelligence or a dangerous obstacle to her mission either. The morning air carried the scent of blooming jasper flowers as Naya made her way to Marcus's garage, her stomach fluttering with an emotion she couldn't quite identify. The twin suns cast long shadows across the cobblestone paths, and she found herself appreciating the organic irregularity of human city planning. On Zelith, every structure was positioned according to mathematical principles of efficiency and harmony. Here, buildings seemed to have grown naturally, following the contours of the land and the whims of their inhabitants. Marcus was already at work when she arrived, bent over the exposed engine of a sleek atmospheric flyer. His movements were precise and economical, each gesture serving a purpose. The morning light caught the concentration in his dark eyes as he made minute adjustments to what appeared to be a quantum flux regulator, technology that should have been decades beyond human capability. "You're punctual," he said without looking up. "Good. Time matters in this business." He straightened, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Your first test is simple. Diagnose what's wrong with that hover bike over there." The vehicle in question looked ordinary enough, but as Naya approached, her enhanced senses detected the subtle wrongness in its energy signature. The problem wasn't mechanical, but rather in the harmonic frequency of its anti-gravity field generators. She spent several minutes examining the bike, partially to maintain her cover and partially because she was genuinely curious about human engineering approaches. "The harmonic resonance is off," she said finally. "The port generator is cycling at 2.7 terahertz instead of 2.65. It's creating interference with the starboard unit." Marcus's eyebrows rose slightly. Most people would have blamed the obvious scorch marks on the hull. "How did you know to check the frequency differential?" "Experience," she replied, which was technically true. Sometimes the real problem isn't the one that shows. For the next 3 hours, Marcus put her through a series of increasingly complex diagnostic challenges. Each test revealed more about both his capabilities and the surprisingly advanced technology hidden within his modest garage. By the time they broke for lunch, Naya was beginning to understand that this assignment would require a fundamental reassessment of human technological development. "You know your way around exotic matter systems," Marcus observed as they sat outside the garage, sharing sandwiches and coffee. "That's not common knowledge, even among certified mechanics." "I had a good teacher," Naya replied, constructing her cover story carefully. "My mentor on Kepler Colony was obsessed with cutting-edge technology. He said understanding the principles behind the tools was more important than memorizing procedures." "Smart man." Marcus's gaze lingered on her face. "What happened to him?" "In the accident." The question struck unexpectedly deep. For a moment, Naya found herself imagining a real mentor, a real life lost to tragedy, and the fabricated grief felt uncomfortably genuine. "He didn't make it out," she said quietly. "Few people did." Marcus reached across the small table and briefly touched her hand. The contact was gentle, meant to comfort, but it sent an unexpected jolt through her nervous system. Her skin tingled where they touched, and for a moment she forgot to maintain the careful emotional shields that were part of her training. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "Loss like that changes a person." The sincerity in his voice made her chest tighten with an emotion she didn't recognize among her own people. Expressions of sympathy were formal, ritualized exchanges. Marcus's compassion felt raw and immediate, as if her pain mattered to him personally despite having known her for less than a day. "Thank you," she managed, pulling her hand back before the contact could affect her further. "I try to honor his memory by doing good work." The afternoon passed quickly as Marcus showed her the garage's inventory systems and introduced her to his regular customers. The community of Millbrook seemed to revolve around personal relationships and mutual support in ways that defied Zelithian understanding of efficient social organization. People lingered to chat about their families, asked after each other's health, and offered help with problems that had nothing to do with mechanical repairs. One customer particularly caught Naya's attention, a woman about her own apparent age with laugh lines around green eyes and prematurely gray hair pulled back in a practical braid. "Elena Rivera," Marcus said by way of introduction, "my sister. And the closest thing this town has to a mechanical engineer." Elena's smile was warm but assessing. "So you're the mysterious Vera that Beth was raving about." Marcus doesn't usually take on assistants. "I'm still evaluating her capabilities," Marcus replied. But there was something in his tone that suggested he'd already made up his mind. "Don't let him fool you," Elena said conspiratorially. "He's been complaining about needing help for months, but he's too particular to trust anyone with his precious equipment." She studied Naya with frank curiosity. "You must have impressed him." Over the following weeks, Naya settled into a routine that felt dangerously comfortable. Mornings were spent at the garage, learning Marcus's methods and gradually earning his trust. Afternoons she used for reconnaissance, mapping the settlement's infrastructure and identifying potential military installations. Evenings were often spent at the local tavern, where she cultivated relationships with other residents and gathered intelligence about the colony's defensive capabilities. The picture that emerged was far more complex than her briefings had suggested. Haven's Rest wasn't just a simple agricultural colony but a carefully planned settlement. With hidden depths, the power grid could be rapidly reconfigured for defensive purposes. The communication arrays had military-grade encryption capabilities, and several residents had backgrounds in fields that seemed oddly specialized for frontier colonists. Most intriguing was Marcus himself. His garage served as an unofficial hub for maintaining equipment that was far too sophisticated for a backwater colony. Gravitational field generators, quantum computers, and even what appeared to be prototype shield emitters passed through his workshop with suspicious regularity. "You're getting that look again," Marcus said one evening as they worked late to repair a damaged atmospheric processor. "The one that says you're thinking too hard about something." Naya glanced up from the component she was calibrating. "What look?" "Analytical. Calculating. Like you're trying to solve a puzzle that's missing pieces." He set down his tools and leaned against the workbench. "Want to talk about it?" The question was casual, but his eyes held genuine concern. Over the past month, Naya had come to recognize the different expressions that crossed Marcus's face. The focused concentration when he worked, the quick smile when Elena teased him, the careful attention when he listened to customers' problems. This was his worried look, the one that appeared when he thought someone he cared about was troubled. The realization that she had earned a place in that category should have been satisfying from a professional standpoint. Instead, it made her feel hollow with deception. "Just thinking about the future," she said, which was true enough. "Sometimes I wonder what I'm really doing here. Building a new life." Marcus replied without hesitation, "Finding your place in a community that values what you have to offer. It's not easy after losing everything, but you're stronger than you know." The faith in his voice was almost unbearable. He believed in her, believed in the person she was pretending to be, and his confidence felt like a weight settling on her shoulders. "When had his opinion begun to matter so much, Marcus?" she said carefully. "What if I told you that nothing about me was what it seemed? That I wasn't the person you think I am?" He considered the question seriously. As he did most things, "I'd say that everybody has parts of themselves they keep hidden. The person you choose to be day after day, that's who you really are. Everything else is just history." The simplicity of his philosophy should have seemed naive, but instead it felt profound in a way that Zelithian psychological theory had never achieved. Her people believed that identity was fixed, determined by genetics and social conditioning. The idea that someone could choose who to become was revolutionary. That night, Naya sat in her small apartment reviewing the intelligence she had gathered. Her reports to Regent Valak had grown increasingly sparse, filled with technical data, but lacking the strategic insights he had expected. The truth was, the more she learned about Haven's Rest, the less she wanted to see it destroyed. The colony wasn't a threat to the Zelithian Empire. It was a refuge for people who had lost everything and were trying to build something better. The advanced technology wasn't meant for war, but for protection. for creating a place where families could grow and communities could flourish. The defensive capabilities she had identified were exactly that, defensive, designed to preserve, rather than conquer, and Marcus was becoming a complication she hadn't anticipated. His quiet strength, his unwavering integrity, the way he looked at her as if she were someone worth knowing. These weren't factors she had been trained to handle. Her attraction to him was growing stronger with each passing day, and she found herself imagining a future that had nothing to do with her mission. The communication device hidden in her apartment chimed softly, indicating an incoming message from her handlers. Naya stared at it for several minutes before finally activating the secure Chan. The morning started like any other, with Naya arriving at the garage to find Marcus already deep in conversation with a man she didn't recognize. The stranger was tall and lean, with the kind of weathered features that spoke of years spent in harsh environments. What caught her attention wasn't his appearance, but the way he carried himself, alert, constantly aware of his surroundings, like someone accustomed to danger. "Vera, meet Tobias Fletcher," Marcus said as she approached. "He runs supply routes between the outer settlements." "Tobias, this is my assistant I've been telling you about." Tobias's handshake was firm, his gray eyes studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Pleasure to meet you. Vera, Marcus says you're quite skilled with exotic systems." "I do my best," she replied carefully, her enhanced senses detecting something off about the man's biorhythms. His heartbeat was too steady, his breathing too controlled, signs of either cybernetic enhancement or extensive training in autonomic regulation. "Tobias needs some modifications made to his transport's shielding ray," Marcus explained, leading them toward a heavily modified cargo hauler parked in the back bay. "The route through the Valdris Nebula has been getting rougher lately." As they worked throughout the morning, Naya found herself stealing glances at Tobias. Something about him felt familiar in a way that made her increasingly uncomfortable. It wasn't until he rolled up his sleeves to help with a particularly stubborn coupling that she saw the faint scarring along his forearms, scarring that looked suspiciously like the marks left by Zelithian neural interfaces. Her blood ran cold as the implications hit her. If Tobias was what she suspected, then her cover might already be compromised. Worse, his presence here suggested that Heaven's Rest was far more important to interstellar politics than her briefings had indicated. "Problem with that flux coupler?" Marcus asked, noticing her distraction. "Just being careful," she replied, forcing her hands to remain steady as she completed the delicate calibration. These older models can be temperamental. The rest of the morning passed in tense normalcy, but Naya couldn't shake the feeling that Tobias was watching her as intently as she was watching him. When he finally departed with his newly upgraded transport, she felt like she could breathe again. "Interesting man," she commented to Marcus as they cleaned up the work area. "Tobias has his secrets." Marcus agreed, "but he's good people. He's saved more than one settlement from disaster by getting emergency supplies through when no one else would risk the trip." That afternoon, Naya excused herself early, claiming she needed to handle some personal business in town. Instead, she made her way to the small apartment she had rented as a secure location for her intelligence work. Hidden beneath a false floor panel were her real communication equipment and the detailed surveillance reports she had been compiling. As she reviewed her files on Heaven's Rest's residents, a disturbing pattern emerged. Too many people had backgrounds that didn't quite add up, skills that seemed excessive for their supposed occupations, and histories with convenient gaps that could hide almost anything. Eleanor Rivera, for instance, had supposedly studied agriculture on New Terra, but her casual familiarity with quantum mechanics suggested education in far more advanced fields. The pieces of a larger puzzle were beginning to take shape, and Naya didn't like the picture they formed. Heaven's Rest wasn't just a refugee settlement. It was a carefully constructed haven for people who needed to disappear from their former lives, which meant that her mission to gather intelligence on human defensive capabilities might have put her in the middle of something far more complex than a simple colonial expansion. That evening, she joined her usual group at the Wanderer's Rest Tavern, hoping that casual conversation might provide some clarity. The establishment was a converted cargo container that had been expanded and decorated with an eclectic mix of artifacts from across the galaxy. Jenna Morrison, Beth's daughter and the closest thing Naya had to a friend among the younger residents, waved her over to a corner table. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Jenna observed as Naya settled into her chair. "Rough day at the garage?" "Just tired," Naya replied, accepting a glass of the local fruit wine that Jenna poured from the bottle they were sharing. "Sometimes I feel like I'm still trying to figure out where I fit in here." "Give it time," advised Carol, a middle-aged man who worked in the settlement's hydroponic farms. "We all felt like outsiders when we first arrived. The thing about Heaven's Rest is that nobody asks too many questions about where you came from. What matters is what you contribute now." The comment was meant to be reassuring, but it only confirmed Naya's growing suspicions about the nature of this community. She was about to probe further when the tavern's door opened to admit Marcus, followed closely by Elena and several other people she recognized as prominent community members. "Emergency council meeting," Marcus announced to the room at large. "Everyone needs to hear this." The casual atmosphere evaporated as the tavern's patrons arranged themselves to listen. Marcus moved to the center of the room, his expression grim in a way that made Naya's stomach clench with foreboding. "We've received word through our early warning network," he began. "Long-range sensors have detected a fleet massing in the Zirian system, approximately 6 weeks' travel from here. The ships match Zelithian design specifications." A murmur of concerned voices rippled through the crowd. Naya fought to keep her expression neutral while her mind raced. 6 weeks, that was exactly the timeline Regent Valak had given her for completing her intelligence gathering. "How many ships?" someone called out. "Preliminary count suggests a full invasion force," Elena replied, stepping forward. "At least 40 vessels, including dreadnought-class battleships. Do we know their intended target?" Jenna asked, her voice tight with worry. "Intelligence suggests they're moving toward this sector," Marcus said grimly. "Which means Heaven's Rest is either their primary objective, or we're unlucky enough to be in their path." The room erupted in urgent conversations as people began discussing evacuation plans and defensive measures. Naya sat frozen in her chair, overwhelmed by the realization that these people, her friends, her chosen community, were preparing to defend themselves against forces she had helped target them. "Vera," Jenna's concerned voice pulled her back to the present. "Are you all right? You look pale." Naya started to speak, then stopped as she noticed Marcus watching her from across the room. His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes made her think he was seeing more than she wanted to reveal. The meeting continued for another hour, with various members of the community volunteering for different aspects of their defense preparations. It became clear that Heaven's Rest was far better prepared for military action than any normal colony should be. They had evacuation protocols, communication networks, and contingency plans that spoke of professional military experience. When the gathering finally dispersed, Naya found herself walking slowly back to her apartment, her mind churning with conflicting loyalties and growing dread. She had barely reached her door when footsteps behind her made her turn. Marcus stood a few meters away, his hands in his pockets and his expression thoughtful. "Mind if we talk?" "Of course," she replied, though every instinct screamed that this conversation would change everything between them. They walked in silence to a small park overlooking the settlement's main residential area. The twin moons were rising, casting everything in silver light that reminded Naya painfully of the crystalline cities of her home world. "You know," Marcus said finally, settling onto a bench carved from local stone, "when I first met you, something felt familiar. I couldn't place it at first, but tonight, watching your reaction to the news about the Zelithian fleet, it finally clicked." Naya's heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to sit beside him. "I don't understand." "I think you do." His voice was gentle but implacable. "The way you move, the way you process information, your unconscious familiarity with technology that should be alien to human refugees. It all makes sense if you're not actually human." The accusation hung between them like a physical barrier. Naya felt the careful structure of her deception crumbling, and with it, any hope of maintaining the life she had built here. "I don't know what you're suggesting," she said weakly. Marcus turned to face her directly, his dark eyes reflecting the moonlight. I'm suggesting that Vera Chen died in that mining accident on Kepler Colony. Just like you said, but the person sitting next to me right now has never been to Kepler Colony at all. The gentleness in his voice was somehow worse than anger would have been. He wasn't condemning her. He was simply stating facts with the same careful precision he brought to mechanical diagnoses. If you're right, she said carefully, what would that mean? It would mean that someone I've come to care about very much has been lying to me. Since the day we met. He paused, studying her face in the moonlight. But it would also mean that whoever you really are chose to stay here, chose to become part of our community, chose to help us prepare for what's coming. The last part broke something inside her chest. You don't understand the choice I'm facing. Then help me understand. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in both of his. Whatever brought you? The emergency transmission arrived at 3 in the morning, jolting Naya from restless sleep. Her hidden communication device pulsed with the urgent priority signal, reserved for critical mission updates. As she activated the holographic display, Regent Valok's image materialized with an expression of cold impatience that made her skin crawl. Agent Naya, your progress reports have become unacceptably vague. The invasion timeline has been accelerated. Our fleet will arrive in 18 standard days, not 6 weeks as your human intelligence sources believe. The words hit her like a physical blow. 18 days, barely enough time to evacuate the settlement, let alone mount any meaningful defense. Her mind raced through calculations of transport capacity, population numbers, and the logistics of moving an entire community to safety. Your final mission parameters are as follows, Valok continued, his silver eyes glinting with predatory satisfaction. You will disable their communication array on the night before our arrival, ensuring they cannot call for aid. You will also eliminate the individual known as Marcus Rivera, whose technical expertise poses the greatest threat to our occupation forces. The hologram flickered as Naya's hand trembled, nearly disrupting the signal. Regent, I must protest. You must obey. Valok cut her off sharply. Your emotional compromise has been noted and is now irrelevant. The Empire's needs supersede your personal attachments. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of the settlement. Rather than selective occupation, the transmission ended, leaving Naya alone in the darkness with the weight of an impossible choice. Save heaven's rest by betraying and murdering the man she loved, or watch as the Zelithian fleet reduced the entire settlement to ash. Either path led to the destruction of everything she had come to value. She dressed mechanically and made her way through the sleeping settlement, toward the small workshop where Marcus often worked late into the night. The pre-dawn air was cool against her skin, carrying the scent of night-blooming flowers and the distant sound of atmospheric processors humming in the distance. Light spilled from the workshop windows, confirming her suspicion that Marcus would be there. She found him bent over a complex device she didn't recognize, his concentration absolute as he made minute adjustments to its crystalline components. The sight of him working with such careful precision made her chest tighten with an emotion she had never experienced before. The terrible weight of knowing she might lose something irreplaceable. Couldn't sleep either? He asked without looking up, somehow aware of her presence despite her silent approach. Marcus, we need to talk. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. About what I really am, and what's coming. This time he did look up, setting down his tools with deliberate care. I've been wondering when you'd be ready for that conversation. Over the next hour. Naya told him everything. Her true identity as a Zelithian operative, the nature of her original mission, the advanced technology and telepathic abilities her people possessed, and most importantly, the fleet that was even now approaching heaven's rest with conquest in mind. Marcus listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious with each revelation. 18 days, he said finally when she finished, and they expect you to sabotage our defenses from within. They expect me to kill you. Naya corrected, her voice breaking slightly on the words. Your technical expertise makes you a priority target for elimination. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying the device he had been working on. And what do you expect to do? I don't know, She admitted, "If I refuse, they'll destroy the entire settlement. If I comply, I become complicit in genocide. Either way, people I care about will die. There might be a third option," Marcus said slowly. He gestured to the device on his workbench, a complex arrangement of crystalline matrices and quantum field generators that seemed to pulse with contained energy. "What do you know about Zelithian fleet communication protocols?" The change of subject caught her off guard. "Standard quantum entanglement networks, encrypted through bioneural interfaces." "Why?" "Because this," he indicated the device, "is a quantum communication disruptor. It can create interference patterns across multiple dimensional frequencies, effectively jamming any quantum-based communication system within a light-year radius." Naya stared at the innocent-looking apparatus, her enhanced perception beginning to understand its true sophistication. "This is beyond human technology. Where did you get the specifications?" Marcus's expression became carefully neutral. "Let's just say that Heaven's Rest isn't the only settlement that's had to deal with aggressive expansion by galactic powers. Some of us have been preparing for this kind of situation for a long time." The implications hit her like a series of shock waves. "You've known what I was from the beginning." "Not specifically," Marcus replied, "but we've had intelligence suggesting that infiltration was likely. Your rival matched certain patterns we'd been watching for." "We?" Naya felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. "Who exactly are we?" Before Marcus could answer, the workshop door opened to admit Elena and Tobias, along with several other residents she recognized. In the harsh light of the work lamps, she could see details she had missed before. The subtle scars that spoke of cybernetic enhancement, the way they moved with military precision, the alert watchfulness that marked professional soldiers. "Time to read her in fully," Tobias said, his earlier casual demeanor replaced by crisp authority. "The situation's changed enough that we need all hands on deck." Elena moved to a wall panel that Naya had always assumed contained electrical systems. Instead, it opened to reveal a sophisticated command center with displays showing the locations of ships throughout the sector. At the center of the main screen, a cluster of red symbols marked the approaching Zelithian fleet. "Heaven's Rest is more than a refugee settlement," Elena explained as the group gathered around the displays. "It's a coordination center for the Frontier Defense Network, an alliance of independent worlds that have chosen to resist imperial expansion by any galactic power. We've been tracking Zelithian movements for months," Tobias added. "Your people aren't the only ones with long-range reconnaissance capabilities." Naya looked from face to face, seeing her supposed victims in an entirely new light. "You've been using me to gather intelligence on my own people. We've been hoping you'd choose to help us," Marcus corrected gently. "The intelligence we gathered on you suggested someone capable of growth, someone who might be willing to question orders when faced with moral complexity. And if I hadn't," the question came out sharper than she intended, "then we would have dealt with the situation as necessary," Owen Blackwood replied from near the command console. Naya recognized him as the settlement's quiet head of agriculture, apparently another cover identity, but we always hoped it wouldn't come to that. The room fell silent as everyone waited for her response. Naya stared at the tactical displays, processing the revelation that her carefully planned infiltration had been anticipated and countered from the beginning. She should have felt manipulated, angry at being deceived in return. Instead, she felt something that might have been relief. "What do you need me to do?" she asked finally. Marcus smiled, the expression transforming his entire face. "Help us turn the tables on your fleet. The quantum disruptor can block their communications, but we need someone with detailed knowledge of Zelithian systems to target it effectively. More than that," Elena added, "we need someone who can speak for us when the shooting stops. This doesn't have to end in mutual destruction." Owen stepped forward, his expression serious but hopeful. "We're not asking you to betray your people, Naya. We're asking you to help prevent a war that will cost lives on both sides." The next week passed in a blur of preparation and planning. Naya found herself working alongside the very people she had been sent to spy on, using her knowledge of Zelithian technology to help refine their defensive systems. The quantum disruptor was just one part of a larger network of countermeasures. That had been years in development. More importantly, she began to understand the true nature of the Frontier Defense Network. It wasn't a military alliance bent on aggression, but a coalition of worlds that had chosen cooperation over conquest. They shared technology, resources, and expertise in ways that strengthened everyone involved rather than benefiting a ruling elite. It's not perfect, Marcus admitted as they worked late one evening to calibrate the disruptor's targeting matrix. We have disagreements, conflicting interests, cultural misunderstandings, but we've learned that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. My people believe that uniformity creates strength, Naya replied, her fingers dancing across the quantum resonance controls. That chaos and unpredictability are weaknesses, to be eliminated. And what do you believe? The question hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Naya thought about the past months, about the chaotic beauty of human emotion, and the strength that came from choosing to care about others despite the risk of loss. I believe, she said slowly, that my people have forgotten something important about what it means to be alive. Marcus moved closer, his hand covering hers on the control panel. Then help us show them. The warmth of his touch sent ripples through her biomimetic disguise. The Zelithian fleet dropped out of hyperspace at exactly 0400 hours, their crystalline ships gleaming like predatory angels against the star field. From the hidden observation post on Heaven's Rest's outer moon, Naya watched the arrival of her former people with a mixture of dread and determination. 43 vessels arranged themselves in perfect geometric formation, their elegant lines a stark contrast to the makeshift defense platforms that Heaven's Rest had managed to deploy. They're beautiful, Jenna whispered from beside her, staring at the tactical display with a mixture of fear and awe. I never imagined they would be so beautiful. Beauty and cruelty often go hand in hand among my people, Naya replied, her enhanced vision tracking the movement patterns of the fleet. They see themselves as bringing order to chaos, perfection to imperfection. Marcus squeezed her shoulder gently, his touch grounding her in the present moment. Are you ready for this? No, she admitted, then straightened her spine with resolve. But that doesn't matter anymore. The plan they had developed over the past 10 days was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its reliance on precise timing. The quantum disruptor would create a communication blackout that would last exactly 17 minutes, long enough to demonstrate Heaven's Rest's defensive capabilities without giving the Zelithian fleet time to coordinate a devastating counterattack. During that window, Naya would transmit a message that she hoped would change the course of two civilizations. Incoming transmission, Owen announced from the communication console. The fleet is hailing Heaven's Rest. Naya moved to the primary screen as Regent Valok's image materialized in the command center. His silver eyes swept across the assembled faces with cold calculation, pausing when they reached her. For a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of something that might have been disappointment. Citizens of Heaven's Rest, Valok's voice carried the weight of imperial authority. You are harboring a fugitive from Zelithian justice. Surrender the individual known as Agent Naya immediately, and your settlement will be spared. Marcus stepped forward, his expression calm despite the magnitude of the moment. We don't recognize Zelithian authority in this sector. The person you're referring to is a citizen of Heaven's Rest under our protection. I am speaking to humans. Valok replied with dismissive coldness. Your species lacks the cognitive capacity to understand the larger consequences of your actions. I will negotiate only with Agent Naya herself. The calculated insult sent a surge of anger through the assembled defenders. But Naya felt something else entirely. Looking at Valok's perfect features and hearing the absolute certainty in his voice, she realized how much she had changed since leaving Zelith. The person who had accepted that mission months ago would have shared his casual contempt for human chaos and inefficiency. I'm here, Regent, she said, stepping into the transmission field. And I'm exactly where I choose to be. Valok's expression shifted subtly, his predatory focus sharpening. You have been compromised by prolonged exposure to human emotional instability. Return to the fleet immediately for psychological reconditioning. I've been enlightened by exposure to human emotional honesty, Naya corrected. And I'm not coming back. then you force us to retrieve you by less pleasant means. Valok's image gestured, and the tactical display showed Zelithian attack shuttles launching from the main fleet. You have 10 minutes to reconsider before we begin bombardment of the settlement. The transmission ended, leaving the command center. Intense silence outside the reinforced windows. The first wave of Zelithian shuttles could be seen as bright points of light, accelerating toward the planet's surface. Positions, everyone. Marcus commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded troops in battle before. Elena, begin the evacuation sequence for non-combatants. Tobias, activate the defense grid. Owen, prepare the quantum disruptor for deployment. As the team scattered to their assigned positions, Marcus caught Naya's hand. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. She looked into his dark eyes, memorizing every detail of his face. There's no other way. If I don't convince them to stand down, people will die. Maybe everyone will die. And if they don't listen. Naya touched the small device concealed beneath her clothing. A gift from Elena that would ensure her message reached every ship in the Zelithian fleet simultaneously. Then at least they'll understand what they're destroying. The first Zelithian shuttles breached the atmosphere as Naya made her way to the settlement's primary communication array. The quantum disruptor was already charging, its crystalline matrices building toward the energy threshold needed to create sector-wide interference. She had perhaps 3 minutes before the attacking forces reached the settlement's perimeter. All units, this is tactical command. Elena's voice echoed across the settlement's communication network. Defensive positions. Remember, we're buying time, not trying to win a war. Naya reached the communication center just as the first energy bolts began falling on the settlement's outer defensive positions. The shields held, but she could see the telltale flicker that indicated they wouldn't last long against sustained bombardment. She activated the transmission array and began broadcasting on all Zelithian military frequencies. This is Agent Naya, of the 7th Cadre to all Zelithian forces, she began. Her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around her. Cease your attack and listen to what I have to say. The bombardment paused momentarily, surprise, perhaps, or curiosity about what she might reveal. Naya took advantage of the silence to continue. I came to this world as a spy, tasked with gathering intelligence for conquest. What I found instead was something that challenges everything we believe about the nature of civilization and strength. Through the communication center's windows, she could see Marcus coordinating the settlement's defenses with calm efficiency. His presence gave her the courage to continue. The humans we've come to conquer aren't weak or chaotic. They're something we've forgotten how to be. They're free to choose their own paths, their own leaders, their own destinies, and that freedom makes them stronger, not weaker. Quantum disruptor at full charge, Owen's voice came through her earpiece. Deploying in 10 seconds. You think their emotions make them unstable, Naya continued, her words racing against time. But I've learned that their capacity to care about others, to sacrifice for something greater than themselves, to love despite the risk of loss, that's not weakness. That's the greatest strength any species can possess. The quantum disruptor activated with a sound like reality tearing at its seams. Across the approaching Zelithian fleet, communication systems went silent, weapon targeting arrays lost coordination, and for 17 precious minutes, chaos reigned in the ordered perfection of Imperial forces. But Naya's message continued to broadcast, carried by quantum entanglement frequencies that bypassed the disruption entirely. Her voice reached every ship in the fleet, every soldier preparing for battle, every officer convinced of their moral superiority. I have found something here worth dying for, she said, her eyes fixed on Marcus as he worked to coordinate the settlement's response to the landing. Parties. I have found people who judge others by their actions rather than their species, who offer friendship to strangers, who build rather than conquer. I have found love that asks nothing but gives everything. The quantum disruptor's effects were beginning to fade, and she could see Zelithian shuttles regaining coordination for a renewed assault. But something had changed in their approach. Their formations were more hesitant, their fire less concentrated. Regent Valok, she continued, addressing her former commander directly, you trained me to believe that order was more important than freedom, that uniformity was more valuable than diversity. But I've learned that true strength comes from choosing to stand together despite our differences, not from forcing everyone to be the same. On the tactical display, she could see that several Zelithian ships had actually ceased firing entirely. Her words were having an effect, sowing doubt in minds that had never questioned imperial doctrine. To my fellow Zelithians, I offer you a choice, the same choice I was given when I arrived here. You can cling to the certainty of conquest and dominion, or you can risk discovering what we might become if we chose cooperation over control. The communication array sparked and went dark as a Zelithian energy bolt finally found its mark. But the damage was done. Her message had reached its intended audience, and the seeds of doubt had been planted. Naya made her way back to the command center through streets filled with defenders, taking cover behind barricades that had been constructed with human ingenuity and alien technology working in harmony. The sight filled her with pride for the community she had chosen to call home. Message transmitted to all frequencies, Owen reported as she entered the command center. We're getting some interesting responses from individual ship commanders. On the main display, the Zelithian fleet was clearly in disarray. Several ships had broken formation entirely, while others seemed to be engaged in heated internal communications. The landing assault had stalled, with many shuttles simply holding position rather than pressing their attack. Incoming transmission. Elena announced, "It's Regent Valok, but he's not alone." The holograph